الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So now, concluding with our last session, بإذن ta'ala, we will take those terminologies that are famous for the sciences, or famous in the sciences of Hadith. And you will see that a lot of it is categorization. And it would be a lot easier had there been a blackboard or a chalkboard or something that I could write on and explain to you. But بإذن ta'ala, we'll try to make the most of the time we have and along with the resources that we have. So firstly, in terms of the way of transmission, the way a hadith reaches us, there are two ways a hadith will reach us. Like we mentioned about when we were studying the science of the Quran, you have that which is mutawatir and that which is ahad. As for mutawatir, then it is that hadith that has so many narrators in each level of the isnad. And by the levels of isnad, we mean the Sahaba, and then their successors, the tabi'een, and then their successors, the atba' tabi'een. That there are so many narrators in each level that it is impossible for them to have come together and combined on a lie, or introduced a mistake, or take away anything from the original text. Meaning that had one of these three things been done, there were so many people who heard and narrated that they would have been corrected. So this is what al-mutawatir is. As for categorizations of al-mutawatir, you have sometimes what is called al-mutawatir bil-ma'na. And what they mean by al-mutawatir bil-ma'na is that its meaning has become mutawatir. An example of this is the hadith إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. That this hadith, if you look at it in terms of its actual transmission, it is a hadith which is ahad. Meaning it doesn't reach the level of mutawatir that there's so many people narrating it. But on the tongues of the people, it has become so famous that if I said, anything else besides إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, they would have picked it up and I would have been corrected and rectified. So this is al-mutawatir bil-ma'na or al-mutawatir bil-lafz. So this is one categorization of mutawatir. Now as for the opposite of mutawatir, it is al-ahad. And al-ahad, the definition it is given, is any hadith that doesn't reach the level of mutawatir. So a very simple definition, but in order to understand it, you have to understand what mutawatir is. Now as for the categorizations of ahad, then you have three main categorizations under ahad. You have al-mashhur. So when you hear a hadith is mashhur, we'll get as to what it means. Then you have a hadith which is aziz. And then you have hadith which is gharib. And all of these three go under ahad. As for al-mashhur, the way these scholars of hadith define it is that it is those hadith that has three or more narrators in each category or in each level. So three or more narrators in each level. Yet it doesn't reach the level of tawatur or mutawatir. So it has three or more narrators in each level. As for al-aziz, it has two or more level, it has two or more, let us go back to al-mashhur, because if you go forwards it won't make sense. Going back to al-mashhur, meaning that there are at least three in each level. Right? So if there are three and more, and it doesn't reach the level of mutawatir, this hadith is known as mashhur. But if it goes down to two people, this hadith is no longer known as mashhur, but becomes as al-aziz. And the way you see this is that sometimes there will be three companions who narrate the hadith, and then you'll get, let's just say, 10 tabi'een who narrate from the Sahaba, but from the atba' tabi'een, you only get two people. So in the first you have three. So that tabaqa would be mashhur. Then the second category from the tabi'een, you have 10. So this could still be mashhur, or it could become mutawatir. Right? But on the third level, you only have two people narrating it. And when you give a hukum on the hadith, you always look at the level that has the least amount of narrators. So if there are only two people at the third level, or at the level of the atba' tabi'een, this hadith is given the grading of aziz. That even though there were 3 Sahaba, even though there were 10 of the Tabi'een, if at the third level, at the Atba' Tabi'een, if you only have 2, it is given the hukum of Aziz. So meaning that if it has 3 or more in each level, it is mashhur. But if it reaches 2 in any point of the chain of narration, then it is given the category of Aziz. And then the level just below it, which is Al-Gharib, is if at one point or any point in the chain of narration, you get 1 narrator. And this is quite possible. You will find a lot of the hadith, especially in the Tirmidhi, that he'll mention a hadith narrated by 2 Sahaba. And then you have about 3 or 4 of the Tabi'een. But when it comes to the Atba' Tabi'een, there's only 1 person who narrated it from all the 3 of the Tabi'een. So this hadith, he would say, وَهَذَا حَدِيثٌ حَسْنٌ غَرِيبٌ. Meaning that even though its narration is Hasan, it was only mentioned by 1 of the Atba' Tabi'een. So these are the categorizations that go under ahad. Now, in terms of ahadith, you have those ahadith which are prophetic and those ahadith which are Qudsiyah, meaning you have ahadith Nabawiyah and you have ahadith Qudsiyah. So this is in terms of who the sayer of the statement is, or the original sayer of the hadith. As we mentioned in our discussion in the sciences of the Quran, the ahadith al-Qudsiyah are those ahadith that the Prophet ﷺ narrates on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as for the ahadith al-Nabawiyah, then they are the statements of the Prophet ﷺ. So that is one difference. And that is between who the original sayer is. Now, this is one categorization between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You have another categorization which is just between the creation, meaning between the 3 levels of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You have another categorization. So, finishing with the first one, you have ahadith al-Qudsiyah and al-ahadith al-Nabawiyah. Al-Qudsiyah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Nabawiyah from the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Then in terms of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or in terms of men as better phrased, then you have another 3 levels. You have Marfu', Maqtu' and Mawquf. As for the term Marfu', then it is all those statements that are attributed or go back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So anything that goes back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is called marfu'. And remember, this is all related or correlated to the category. Like a hadith nabawiyah is a statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and marfu' is a statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and likewise mutawatir and ahad are statements of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But each of them has a separate categorization. Whereas mutawatir and ahad, we're looking at the form of transmission. Many transmitters, few transmitters. In terms of Qudsiyah and Nabawiyah, we're looking at who said the original statement. Now, in this third categorization, we're looking at who said the original statement, but between 3 groups. The Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba and the Tabi'een. So that's a clear distinction that needs to be made. As for the hadith al-marfu', then they are from the Prophet ﷺ. Then sometimes you will see in the books of hadith, it says marfu' hukman, that it takes the hukam or the ruling of a marfu' hadith. And what usually is happening over here is you will have a companion speaking about a matter that he only could have heard from Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. An example of this being in Ayatul Kursi, as is mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari, Ibn Abbas mentions that the Kursi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the place of the feet. Now this is not something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ibn Abbas could have come up with on his own. And these people feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they would not speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except with knowledge. So this statement of Ibn Abbas, even though we don't have a chain of narration to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we say هذا مرفوع حكما, that it takes the ruling of a marfu' hadith. So this is a subcategory of marfu'. Now the next category after marfu' is maqtu'. And maqtu' is usually a synonym for athar. And what they mean by this